Hi, Chris. This is question 15152-153. So this was on Centipede, and Centipede asked us to here we are. So you're a supervisor at this company, at Ant & Co, and you are planning a final audit listed. So I don't sometimes even argue that just being a listed company, there's the general risk of all the paperwork and all the requirements, internal controls, disclosures, professional skepticism that has to just happen. The fact that it also needs a second review, those sorts of things are something to just bear in mind. They buy and they sell things through their website and wholesale as new client, so risk straight away. You don't have enough knowledge. I think you mentioned that. We'll talk about that. You don't have enough knowledge, so you want experienced staff. So there's some straight away, you see them, you pick it up, you know what they're looking for. You've had a planning meeting with the finance director. They provided you with the notes. Now, there's nothing wrong with, I think I mentioned this when I did inventory. A business can have several, it just depends on how they work. They can do a perpetual inventory count for themselves. It's actually a bit more efficient where they're deciding, it says, you can see, because it says that they cover 1/12 of all lines. So the argument again is if the controls are good, then we can be sure that the inventory is complete. That makes any sense. So when I say complete, that physically all the inventory is there if the controls are good. So basically think of a monthly stock count. So we can then move away from existence and completeness to talk valuation. But if you have exceptions and you're having issues where there are problems, then it means the controls aren't very good. So maybe you might have to force through, like I think you suggested, a year. But then would you be able to attend? So these are the issues you want to think about. Audit assistant attends a perpetual inventory count in September and notes there's a large number of exceptions. So there are issues here, actually, where inventory records were consistently higher than the physical inventory in the warehouse. So we then start to suspect there are some controls issues here. So the key point is you can see strong risk already, strong likelihood that inventory is likely to be overstated, right? Because, again, physical inventory is much less. So we don't know why. Might just be bad controls, or they might actually just be failure to adjust when we find actual maybe obsolete stock and we don't adjust the inventory records to show what's actually on ground. And he says that this has been a recurring, so we know there are issues actually there. And it says here that let me just 1 second. It says here that there's some lines which were at least 90 days. So we know there's a risk of obsolete stock here and therefore inventory being overstated, right? And so we need to get rid of that. Head office, where audit team will be based, 4 additional sites where accounting records are maintained. Sites were not visited during the interim audit. These are incorporated monthly through an interface of the general ledger. So I think you highlight this. The fact is you're not at that site. You don't know what the controls are. So you can't be quite sure. Think of this as almost 2 systems. You can't be quite sure what figures are plugging in to your system. So you're going to have to review those balances coming through to see whether you can actually rely on them and the materiality of the work that's being done there. So that's the issue, really. It's more about controls, because it says here that because these accounting records were maintained over there. So it's very much, can I trust the people maintaining those I haven't observed. Then the 5th site was closed, building was sold. So whenever you see any disposal, it's just what it is. You literally want to ensure that that building no longer exists on the asset register, thus ensuring that assets aren't overstated and that the actual journals have gone through. So you want to literally reperform. So think AEIOU again, reperform examine the fixed asset register, ensure this thing does not exist on there. Reperform the calculations to ensure that the right figures, that the loss is truly showing in the income statement. Legal action, we talked about, you've seen examples of this, so you start getting better at this. Do we need a provision? I need to disclose, blah, 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 that whole drama. And disclosure, directors have in line, which does not require a separate list. You should have a separate list. You see local registration, which does not require a separate list. However, in the country, so we need to abide by their regulations. We need the list. We need the list. So let's go to your work. Let's go to the questions first, actually, and see what they want. So it says, what matters should they consider prior to accepting the audit? So you would have seen this. So you can see one question was, the first question I think in 151 was about preconditions, which is why really doing questions are really the only way to do this thing. We can do as much theory as we want, but when we start doing the questions, we start seeing what's going on. We saw a question about preconditions. I think you talked about professional clearance, but this question is really asking you to pick a couple from here, which you do. So a range of things, right? A range of things to think about, really, a range of options. So then I think that goes on to ask us to calculate 6 ratios, and I'll come to your work, and then asks us to look at the risks, if you like. And then that question is technically done. And there's a bit here about safeguards. We'll come to this. But let's look at what you've done so far. And in this question, yes, and I think I liked this. I gave you 3 out of 5. I'm going to go with the black pen this time. So you talk about professional clearance, which is good. Yes, suitable knowledge, but I don't think, I don't know, did they ask for just 2? I think you talk about 2. Let me just see how many they wanted. Second. Yes, 5 marks. Let me look at the mark scheme and see how many they gave you marks for. Oops, sorry. Let me go to the mark scheme. Just quickly looking at this here. Whoops. So they gave you, yeah, they wanted 1 for each. So you needed 5. You needed 5 from here to get the 5 marks. So it's fine. I think what I'll just do is, yeah, I clearly see 2 points. So maybe bring that down to 2 over 5, but it doesn't matter. It's fine because next time you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go to make sure I bring all these guys in, right? To see what's going on. All your ratios are perfect, 6 out of 6. So I think here I can start to see that your work is growing in terms of you're actually now really beginning to focus in on the financial statements a bit more. Still a bit, you're almost avoiding the actual numbers. So we can't really do that. All right, this is much better. I'm literally telling you there's a risk in every paragraph you read in the question. So literally you're thinking, I need to be finding risks. It's a new client, you pick that up, that's very good. Professional clearance, perfect. And so I write suitably qualified personnel, if you like, and gaining a good understanding. I think you talk about that, of this business, first of all. Yes, I think you talk about this risk of obsolete, and you say inventory days, good stock. You say this is recognized either at error, a higher value, and as shown, fine. But I mean, say the word overstated. Say it. And you do review inventory with the client, and then whether the value should be reduced or eliminated altogether. So really what I'm trying to do is I'm testing valuation here, really. So I'm really asking, post year end, has this thing sold? Right? Has it sold? That's what I'm really asking here. Has it sold? And so therefore, I want to be recognizing lower of cost and NRV. That's the issue here, right? And we'll go to the answers in a second. Trade receivables, yes, again, say that it's overstated. There's risk of bad debts, and I don't remember. Let me see was there a bad debt situation here? Let me just sort of see what that bad debt situation was to do with. Sorry, that. So this here was oh right, okay, of course you're talking from the ratios. Of course you are. There is no within the information, they don't highlight the trade receivable issue. We'll come to the answers, but right, you've looked at the ratios. That's fine. That's okay. And even looking at the information, there's just enough material. So of course, you will circularize and you will review and you will see the need for a provision, if you like. Yes. So no year end. I think you said insist on a final stock take. So you can see that it doesn't matter. Perpetual year ends are fine as long as you attend one. And there is more than one site. Yes. So yes, you kind of talk about that and assist. I think this was internal controls, if you like, and testing accordingly. So let's look at their answers and kind of see where we're going here with this, because we want to look as much as we can like the answers. So looking here, a new client, you highlight that suitable experience, so we're fine. We know what's going on there. Um, good. Then again, so they do this perpetual thing, no problem. So inventory could be understated or overstated. We are told already that there are exceptions. So these two link, but the response, the completeness should be reviewed and the controls over the counts. So it's very much a controls matter. We'll come to valuation, and I think valuation must come in here. Again, yes. So these significant exceptions mean there's a valuation issue. So the result in overstated inventory. You want to say that again, like I keep highlighting. We want to say that. So what you want to do is look at the degree of. It says, well, look at the degree of adjustment, discuss and see whether you can place rely where you can rely. Then they talk about the 90 days, all to do with inventory, a lot on inventory. 90 days. Normal is 47 to 54. So you can see you talk about the increase in 7 days, fair enough, but you want to bring in that 90 days, they bring that for you. So review that and see if we need to write down inventory. IAS2, mention that as well. That's what we're trying to do. Go. So we have all these sites we haven't visited. Discuss with management the significant materiality of the records maintained in those 4 sites. So you might have to. It's just what can we do to make sure we can actually go in and look at those sites? Because all they're doing is they're sending you the final documents, you see. So you want to go in and see, is there a way we can actually get our hands on the information on those sites, on the information there. We're selling off. This question is it still and this was a good question. So whenever you see these assets being bought and sold, you're looking at the fixed asset, non-current asset register, recalculating and just pretty much calculating. I actually forgot that there's so much the depreciation policy. Because if you don't, if you have, of course, if you have non-current assets wrong or incorrect, depreciation will be affected as well. Legal action, again, we've talked about that from the previous question. Again, we need to disclose why you are not disclosing all the names. It is in line with the IFRS. You should disclose. And then where they're looking at the ratios now, and then playing around with that. So we can see there might be some issues here if revenue has grown by 19% and cost of sales has increased by 13. So there might be some issues with. So again, we can see, so whenever you're seeing this, the principle is the same. Whenever you have this sudden increase in revenue and cost of sales hasn't increased by the same, we might have cutoff issues. So cutoff testing we did recently in class, we want to be sure that the revenue that we have is for the right period. So we don't have revenue from 2017 being put in 2016. That's all cutoff is saying. We want to highlight that. And overall liquidity is in decline. So if we have this problem here where we're struggling, we might have some going concern issues. So going concern testing is really us looking at the forecast and looking at cash. How quickly is cash coming in? Great. And then finally, the last question was about a conflict of interest, I believe. It was the benefits of, sorry, and should be, so I think they're asking you to take on work by the work of a competitor, and you're going to do that. And I think I talked a long time ago about Enron having to take work on for Pepsi and Coca-Cola, and them choosing to drop. I think it was Pepsi, and carrying on with. So you can see there are issues there. There's a conflict of interest because here's the issue: how are we sure that information will not be leaked or shared? So let's look at what they're telling us to do. So both Centipede and its rival competitor, first of all, should know that you're doing both. You're acting as auditor, and they should be happy with it. Advise to just seek additional independent advice. Of course, you mentioned all of this. Use separate engagement teams. They need to sign confidentiality forms, if you like, and they probably will both need external quality control reviews because there's a risk here in terms of quality control and monitoring. And you said everything right: secure data filing, firewalls, Chinese walls, and I think I gave you I think this was 4 marks. Let's see how many marks this was, and I think I at 5 marks, and I think I gave you 3 out of 5, because this is question of notification that was missing, but otherwise, this was much better answered question. But again, our focus again is you're thinking financial statements when you think audit risk. Cool, great stuff. See you in the next question.